It is 3:07 in the morning. An alarm appears on the building automation system. A critical area is drifting outside its normal range. The usual engineer is on vacation. The person on call tries the escalation number. No answer. They call a second number, then stop. Is this alarm real? Is it safe to wait? Who is allowed to make that decision? That is the moment when a building's hidden dependency becomes visible. If the operation depends on one person's memory, it may be working, but it is not fully resilient. Welcome to Built, Wired, and Secured. I'm Alex Morgan.
Today we're discussing the 3 a.m. test. Could someone else recognize the issue, make a safe first decision, and reach the right support if the usual expert is unavailable? Michael Harrington brings the property and continuity perspective. James Rogers works from the facilities, maintenance, and building systems side. Thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here. That scenario feels familiar because the risk is rarely obvious at noon. It appears when the phone is ringing, people want answers, and the one person who knows the history is unreachable.
Right. And the expert may not be the person with the biggest title. It is often the engineer who knows which alarm is meaningful, which one is old noise, and which call has to happen first.
So this is not an argument against expertise.
Not at all. Expertise is valuable. The operational design problem is allowing critical decisions to live in only one person's head. From an operational standpoint, the test is simple. If that person cannot be reached, can the next person understand the symptom, take a safe first step, and contact the right owner?
And nobody is expected to become that expert overnight. The question is whether the team has enough shared understanding to avoid making the situation worse. Technology should support operations, not complicate them.
What does that dependency look like in real life?
In the handoff, in the phone tree, in the sentence, call Pat. Pat knows. Sometimes it is a BAS alarm that behaves differently during a seasonal change. Sometimes a piece of equipment has a workaround that was supposed to be temporary.
And temporary lasted 6 years. That is where teams get exposed. The dependency may be technical, but it may also be judgment. When to monitor, when to escalate, and who needs to know about the business consequence.
Would you start by listing the people everyone depends on, or by listing the situations that create the pressure?
I start with the situation. The base is critical is true, but too broad. Pick one event. A temperature alarm, a communication failure, an equipment fault, or an access issue. Then ask, what decision has to be made in the first 10 minutes?
I would start one step earlier. Who does everyone call when that event happens? If the same name appears again and again, you have found a risk signal before you even map the process.
I see that. I just do not want a list of names without the decisions behind those names. Otherwise, the organization knows who to call, but not what that person is carrying. So use both. Find the people, then trace each dependency back to the event, the judgment, and the safe boundary. That tells you what belongs in a handoff and what still requires qualified support.
Give us a bounded example. Not a site-specific incident, but something a listener could recognize.
Here is a composite one. At 3:20 in the morning, a temperature alarm appears for a controlled area. The display shows a change, but the area is also in a scheduled operating mode transition. The on-call person cannot tell whether the alarm is expected, whether waiting is safe, or whether a technician should be dispatched. The person who knows that history is asleep, and the escalation contact is outdated.
That is not simply a training gap. It is a continuity gap. The missing information is the decision path, what the reading means in that operating mode, what can be observed safely, when the condition becomes urgent, and who owns the next call.
Afterward, the team creates a short reference. It does not explain the whole system. It says what the symptom looks like, what to verify, what not to change, and where to escalate. That small improvement turns private memory into shared operational context.
That gets us to documentation. Most teams know they need something, but the choices seem to be no guidance or a giant manual nobody opens at 3 a.m.
The giant manual usually begins with good intentions, but under pressure, the on-call person needs a short route through uncertainty. What am I seeing? What may I safely observe? What action is allowed and what has to wait?
And who owns the next decision?
Exactly. A reference should separate observation from action and action from escalation. It should include the business priority, the owner, the backup owner, and the date it was last reviewed. Reliability starts with disciplined maintenance, and instructions need maintenance too.
The problem is, a card can tell you what to do, but not
who is allowed to do it. Right, that boundary matters. Good guidance must not create false confidence or invite an unfamiliar person into a complex intervention. Sometimes the correct action is to observe, preserve information, and escalate.
So the useful document is not an encyclopedia. It is a decision aid for the first few minutes.
Yes, but it earns its value only when the escalation path is real. A polished procedure with an unreachable contact is not continuity. The owner, backup, preferred channel, and response expectation have to be current.
How do we know the reference works before the next overnight event?
Give it to someone who did not help write it. Use a realistic scenario and ask them to find the symptom, explain the first decision, and identify the escalation. You are not testing whether they can become the expert. You are finding where the process becomes ambiguous.
That can take 15 minutes after planned maintenance. Ask, if I were not here tomorrow, what would you need? Then let someone try to find it. If they call you 3 times to interpret the page, that is useful evidence.
As long as it stays non-punitive. If every exercise becomes an investigation into who missed something, people will protect knowledge instead of sharing it. The purpose is to strengthen the operation that evolved under pressure.
What questions should teams ask after maintenance or an incident?
What did we expect? What did we actually see? Which decision depended on experience? What would confuse someone new? And what changes before the next cycle? A work order can say complete, while the real lesson is hidden in the operating mode, the timing, or a recent change. Preventative maintenance beats emergency repairs every time. Preventative knowledge sharing works the same way.
That context also belongs in continuity planning. If a tenant-facing service is affected, the response cannot stop with the equipment. Someone must understand the communication path, the business priority, and when leadership is brought in. Here is the downstream impact. Unclear technical ownership becomes unclear operational communication.
So resilience needs redundancy in equipment, connectivity, and understanding.
And cross-training does not mean making everyone an expert in everything. It means enough overlap that an absence does not become a mystery. One person may understand the equipment deeply. Another needs to recognize the symptoms, follow the safe path, and know when to stop.
Let me make this usable. Choose one process this week. What are the 4 questions?
First, name the dependency. Which person, decision, contact, or workaround carries more weight than the organization realizes?
Second, capture the decision path. What should the next person recognize? What may they safely do? And what must be escalated?
Third, assign the owner and backup. Make the escalation route current and easy to find. What breaks if this goes down?
Fourth, test it with someone unfamiliar. Let them find the information and explain what they would do. Their questions are not an inconvenience. They show where the operation still depends on memory.
That is the 3 a.m. test. Name the dependency, capture the decision path, assign ownership, and test it with someone who was not there when it was written. Not a promise that everyone knows everything. Enough shared understanding to make the next safe decision.
Because the real warning sign is not that one person is highly capable. It is that the operation stops making sense when that person is unavailable.
This week, choose one alarm, handoff, or after-hours decision that normally depends on one person. Ask whether someone else could recognize the issue, take the safe first step, and reach the right support. If the answer is no, you have found a design improvement, not a failure. That wraps up this episode of Built, Wired, and Secured. Today we explored why operational resilience includes shared understanding, not just redundant systems. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us. Until next time, make sure the systems you're responsible for are built to last, wired with intention, and secured for the real world.
Built to last, wired with intention, secured for the real world.